In this series, lowimpact.org talks with people working to build a mutually owned, democratic, decentralised economy that builds community and doesn't destroy nature. We want to increase collaboration to bring about system change. Find links to the sites mentioned in the videos in the description below. Join the conversation by liking, commenting and subscribing to our channel.
So today I'm talking with Grace Rachmany. Hello, Grace.
Hello, Dave.
Now, I've recently done your Future Ain't What It Used to Be course on the future of currencies, of money, of the economy. We looked at DAOs and NFTs and different kinds of currencies and different ways that people might interact with each other and exchange things. And I met lots of interesting people and heard new ideas and watched things that I'd otherwise have missed. I recommend it highly, and I'll put a link below.
Yeah.
I discovered that we have similar values based around decentralization and mutualism, and that you have a cunning plan to change the world. So I'd like to talk about that and try to get you to explain it in very simple terms, if that's okay. But so before we talk about what you're doing, the first thing I'd like to ask is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's your motivation?
All right. I do have to say, though, that when somebody says that I have a cunning plan in an English accent, I don't feel like it's a compliment.
It's like trying to build an evil empire or something.
It's like everything you say is a little bit, is it tongue in cheek or not? You know. Anyway, so what is the problem I'm trying to solve? I think that that's an interesting question. I'm a systems person. And so and I think we all can see that wherever we look, there's something not quite right, whether it's the healthcare system or it's the environment or the inequality. And you sort of look around and you're like, oh, I want to solve this one or that one and the other. Yeah. But actually, this is an underlying systems problems. If you think about, I talk about this sometimes, like I don't have wheels. Wouldn't it be nice to have wheels instead of feet? But I can't have them because there's some structural infrastructure of how carbon-based life forms on Earth are that none of us have wheels. And so you have to start to look at what is the infrastructure problem that is causing all of these external things, like whether it's inequality or environmental destruction. And so really I'm trying to look at what are the flows that we generally ignore, or we think that's just the way it is, right? And some of them, of course, in nature, you can't change them. I breathe oxygen. There's not something I can do about that. But in our system, things like, oh, we're using AI in a certain way, or we're using money in a certain way. Well, what is money? We just invented that. So what are those systems? First of all, identifying what are those systems, and then seeing what might be a replacement system that we could invent that would change some of the structural restrictions and limitations that we have on the outcomes we can get.
And are you talking specifically about the money system, or are you talking about all aspects of the economy and society?
I would say that there are a few main aspects. The monetary system happens to be the one I'm focused on. It's a little bit more visible, but you can think of something. So monetary system is certainly one of them. Money itself is an invented thing. And so how does money work? It's like saying something like, if you build your city by a river, then there's certain kinds of transportation can arrive there. Otherwise, you need railroads or cars, right? So money is one of those flows, just like a river might be one of those flows. Roads might be one of those flows. Another one might be AI, and it's a little bit invisible to us. So you might look at, I talk about this, the boxer problem. One day, Amazon advertised these men's boxers to me, black men's boxers. They're the kind I like, just so you know. I mean, not on me, obviously. Well, not obviously. I could go either way.
It's the 21st century, who cares?
But they were the kind I like. And the reason they were advertising them to me, because I was working for a client and I was researching hydraulic cylinders on YouTube and learning about hydraulic cylinders. And also I had just moved into a place with a wood stove. So I had bought some welding gloves, to protect my hands, and some fire tongs and things. And so Amazon advertised men's boxers to me. And that's like an invisible force that we're all aware of, that's making decisions for us. And so what you see on your feed, what you see on your shopping, that's another one of those invisible forces that I would say underlie the possible outcomes. When you search Google, it shows you something, then it's different than it shows me. for any simple search.
Mm.
One of the things people said, you mentioned my future course. One of the women who did my course said, all of a sudden YouTube started showing me things I had never seen before, because YouTube is based on your past history. So, and you mentioned it too, I had never been exposed to these things. Well, why not? You were interested, right? The reason why not is there's an invisible algorithm that decides what are the options that you're going to get on your YouTube channel for your next video to see.
Mm.
And that's in an invisible force that is fundamentally underneath, like, what, you know, what's happening in the Ukraine, who knows, right? But you're going to see something different that I'm going to see.
And
so
why is that
that's
why is
another
that such a bad
invisible
thing?
force.
Why is that such a bad thing?
Oh, I'm not saying it's bad or good,
Right.
but it certainly limits the outcomes that you and I could get. So if, let's say, there's an algorithm that's optimizing right now for the maximum amount of money I might spend, that's not in my interest. Like, for example, I'll give a very simple example, right? Let's say I buy all of my clothing on a website, right? And I start buying slightly larger trousers. Now, what the algorithm will do was continue to sell me more slightly larger trousers. It won't try to sell me more nutritional stuff so that I could lose weight, or, you know, or a treadmill or some gym memberships, right? And that's an arbitrary decision of the algorithm, but it's a decision based on what will sell me more stuff, not on what's actually better for me. What's actually better for me is to get on a fitness program. I mean, or maybe I'm pregnant, right? If I'm pregnant, then it'll sell me. So it will know that. If that they are aware, if you buy certain supplements, certain sized clothing, certain things, they'll start advertising you baby stuff. So, yeah. But if I'm just gaining a bit of weight, it won't try to advertise me something that is for my health. It'll advertise something that's for that e-commerce site's health. So it's not necessarily bad or good. It's just that right now the algorithms are clearly not programmed for my good. Mm. And then we look at some of the health outcomes that, if you think about social media, right? Media and communication is another one of those invisible things, right? You and I used to talk a lot more than we texted. But our children, I don't know if you have children, but my children have text a lot more than they talk with their friends.
Yeah.
And my daughter was just talking about a little bit of a row that she was having with her best friend, and her best friend kept texting her, and she said, I won't text you. We need to meet. We need to talk. We need to stop texting about this thing.
Yeah.
Because some children, not all of them, some young people recognize that text is not the way to resolve this kind of an emotional issue. But a lot of people, I mean, people break up by text. Can you imagine?
Yeah, or
right?
lose their job via text.
Yeah, it's not and that form of communication creates certain types of misunderstandings that you might not create by verbal communication like we're doing. And so it does matter. And these are these underlying forces that we don't think about. And so when you talk about what problem I'm trying to solve, that's why I talked about how I don't have wheels, because I've got a circulatory system and a respiratory system and a musculoskeletal, I can never say that one, skeletal system that set boundaries for my body. And this is the same thing if you talk about a communications methodology, if you talk about a search engine methodology, if you talk about a monetary system, they set certain boundaries. Or even just, you know, our passport systems, right? Like, I need a passport to get into certain countries and not other countries because I'm in the EU, unlike you. And right.
That's a whole nother subject.
But again, you know, how'd that happen, right? Another system, I started from government. I was really interested in democracy. I ended up with money, as you know, from my systems, but I started with democracy. And one of the things we know about democracy is that you vote. Yeah, but how did all those things get on the ballot, right? How many of us have ever gone to the ballot and been like, wow, all these candidates are so wonderful. All these parties are wonderful. It's hard to even pick the best one. They're all so good, right? That's a very different voting system than the one we have, which is like, just hold my nose, you know, pick one of them. And so
it doesn't really generate very good leaders, does it? Right. The people who climb to the top of the greasy pole are not the best among us, really.
No, not at all. And so that's another example of a system where we feel like, well, voting is the best thing we've invented so far. Well, as Churchill says, but so what? you know, we can invent something better. Why not? It's the best thing we've invented so far, and it's not good enough for our current situation. And so that's what I'm talking about, these underlying systems that it's not that I'm sort of solving one problem, but I'm kind of looking at what are some of the ways that we could change some of those underlying protocols that would shift the realm of possible outcomes that we could have.
So you're not talking about an overarching blueprint. You're talking about building different elements of a new kind of system.
Yeah, that's correct. And if you think about our bodies, it's a very good thing. It's like, okay, well, if one of my toes hurts, right? You know, that there's a system for notifying me of that, right? It's a symptom of something, right? So there's these notification systems that I would get.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the elements that you're talking about then. So tell us about your ideas. What are you doing?
Yeah. So right now, what I've been working on is an alternative to money. Now, people are like, well, people have always had money, and that's not true, of course. For our history as human beings, it's only a few hundred years that we've had money. So obviously, it's an invention, and just like every invention, it will become outdated. When will it become outdated? Well, I would argue it's already outdated. But it will probably take a generation or two to shift to the next thing, which is fine. And I think that's the other thing. When I talk to people about what problem we should solve, a lot of times the difference between how they view it is the timeline they're thinking of. You know, so I talk to sometimes the people in the industry, like Matthew Slater is a perfect example, right? People who are in the alternative currencies industry. And he says, look, we just got to find something that's going to get people through this period right now. The situation's desperate. And I'm saying, oh, well, I'm looking at something that's maybe 2 generations out, and it seems irrelevant right now. So that's the other thing to say about it. And I think we need both. So
you're sowing seeds. You're sowing seeds of this alternatives to the money system.
Yeah. And then you could think about sowing seeds. I'm sowing seeds to something that's more like an oak tree, and there are other people who might be sowing seeds to something that's more like a tomato plant, and they grow in different trajectories, right? So we're all sowing seeds, but some of our plants will grow faster than other plants as well. It's a really wonderful analogy. So, so the thing that I've been working on is what would be an alternative to currency, money. And one of the past systems, we've been taught this kind of lesson that once upon a time people used to barter. And I don't think that that's particularly accurate.
It's not accurate at all, no. It's only in very marginal situations.
Hold on just a moment. Give my friend the keys. Sorry. We would share, and it's quite obvious, right? If you know, in order to kill that buffalo, a whole bunch of us had to go out there. And then we brought back the buffalo to the people who cooked the buffalo, and we all shared it. I mean, it was going to go bad. And some people maybe knew how to cure it and salt it, and other people, whatever, but it was just ours, because our village as a group had to put its head together to manage that. And we also might have thought, well, the people who are taking care of the kids where we're off at the hunt, that's also part of our ability to go off and hunt. There wasn't a sense that this is mine because I'm the best, you know, I'm the best whatever hunter.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
you had to contribute something. You had to contribute something to the group, otherwise you didn't get any buffalo.
Well, I would say yes and no. Because what's the village idiot, right? The village idiot is that person that's like, we don't just let him starve.
Unless you can't contribute. Yeah, unless you can't contribute.
And we knew who the people who couldn't, and we treated them fairly. And we knew who the people were who were being a jerk.
Yeah.
You know, we know that guy's just being a lazy butt. And, you know, if then we'd say to him, dude, you know, get your stuff together. And if he didn't, we might throw him out of the tribe. We might slit his throat. We might, whatever it is in our, you know, we might do some shamanistic healing ceremony over him and give him some psychedelics or whatever it is we did. But our tribe would have the ritual for dealing with that free rider problem.
And even much later than the hunter-gatherer societies, sort of in the Middle Ages, I know David Graeber talked about a medieval inn where the barman would be pouring drinks all night, but nobody would have any money. It would be a village where nobody actually had any physical money. And so, you know, the person over there was a thatcher, the person over there was a baker, the person over there was a fisherwoman who would bring fish. Everybody contributed something, and everybody just kept tallies in their head, and they knew who was lazy and who was pulling their weight and who wasn't. And so everybody just got what they needed through some sort of a informal, I guess mutual credit is the only way to think about it. It wasn't barter. You didn't need to find somebody to swap something with.
But it's not mutual credit, because you're not keeping tabs, really.
In your
When you
head
think
a little
about
bit,
keeping
in your head a little
in
bit.
your head, but think about how you keep tabs with mutual credit versus how you keep this, because this is relevant to what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to create. How you keep tabs in your head versus mutual credit, right? How you keep tabs in your head is very different. It's kind of like, it's approximately cool, and it's like that person did their best and they really couldn't do more, and you know, it's all right. Or like with your spouse or with your child, it's like, good job, young man, you know, you got to clean up after he cleaned up, right? And it's not a swap. And so it's a very different way of keeping tabs. Or mentoring, for example, it's something like, well, when I was young, somebody mentored me, and now I'm mentoring somebody and I'm paying it forward. It's not exactly the same kind of keeping tabs.
Is it that different though, from keeping it in your head to writing it down in a notebook? Is that
It's not different, but it's, what do you write down? So I mentor a lot of people, of course, as you can tell by my gray hairs. And my basic criteria is it a good deal? It's if they took my advice. So if they, you know, so I had somebody who wanted to have a regular coaching call with me every 2 weeks. And after the 3rd week, he hadn't done his assignment in between this, you know, and I said, well, we're finished. So it's not whether he's paying me, it's whether, sorry about that, got some hair in the wrong place. It's not about whether it's a fair deal that he's giving back to me or he's paying forward. As a mentor, I want to know that my time is being used successfully by the person I'm mentoring. And so that's very different from mutual credit, isn't it? It's like, I'm giving my advice to people who will take it and not to people who won't take it.
No, I'm not. I like your.
So it's a very different, right? Like, so it's a different kind of tab. And so in the example that's more relevant for me, I'm working with Village on an individual level. So one of the things that we just distinguished is, what do we do with the Village idiot, right? And how do we know who is being a free rider versus, you know, who's just having a hard time or is a little weaker or their skill isn't as valued, whatever it is, but they're contributing, right? An older person might just be contributing wisdom. This is not very visible.
Yeah.
And it might be just, yeah.
I mean, so I know that I think this is what you're talking about. So the Let's scheme, when the Let's scheme started, people kept tallies but after a while, people just got to know each other and they just did those favors for each other without keeping tally. So it was, but I think those things are very closely related and they could both coexist in the same community, I think.
Oh yeah, I think they can. I think the thing is, so you use the C word, right? Community. What do we even mean by community? And that's one of the things that's gotten very cheapened lately, right? You know, I happen to be in London, which is very strange because it's not where I was 2 days ago, because a friend of mine called me up and he was having some trouble closing his business. And he called me up for advice and I could hear immediately in his voice that he didn't need advice. He needed somebody to be there. And I got on a plane. That's community. But how many of the people, you know, there might be 5 people in your life you would do that for, maybe 10, right? That's a very different kind of community than what our digital communities. And so when we say community, we need to be quite distinct about it. That community that was hunting the buffalo, that's that kind of community.
Yeah, and I'm thinking I'm thinking of actual physical communities as well. I mean, I think that's becoming more and more neglected. And I think there's lots of focus now on tech solutions that avoid face-to-face interaction with real people that you trust in physical communities. And I think it's essential for human well-being to live in those kind of communities. And so
correct. I would say that's accurate. And some people will always be nomadic and move between them, but yes, of course. And those kinds of communities take care of everyone.
Right? So tell us more about your idea. Tell us more about your ideas.
So the idea is, if you've got a location-based community.
Right. And your ideas are location-based.
They could end up be digital communities, but it must be a community, and I'm calling it a mutual vouching community.
Vouching.
Like for this discussion, right? I'm not using that long name when I talk about it. I'm just saying, but it's a mutual vouch. Now, a mutual vouch is very different than an individual vouch. Because I can vouch for David. He showed up on time. He came to all the lessons. He contributed to the group. And then any of the other people could vouch for you. And you might vouch for me. But we're not bound by that. I'm going to call it brand, right? So, but if you say, okay, I'm going to buy, this at this shop, and it's a chain of shops, there's kind of a brand that says anybody under our roof, we're vouching for the goodness of their shop. That's what branding is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm Procter and Gamble or something, anything we produce, we're vouching for that. It's the product of our company. It's a brand. And so that's a mutual vouch is very different. And if I'm in a group, this is one of the things, right? You see it in military very clearly, right? In your group, you're all watching each other's backs. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's
and
not
where
that,
is this? And where is this happening? How is it? Where have you got to? What's the concrete?
So I'm now interviewing communities in Spain.
Spain.
And there's and there's two types of community in the Mondragon region and the Navarra region, where there's
that's in the Basque country in the north, isn't it?
In the area of near the, it's about 50% Basque, 50% Spanish speaking.
Right.
And in that area, there's a long history of cooperatives and mutual help societies like that, and social enterprises. And just as an example, one of the ones I went to was a social enterprise, partially funded by the government, partially funded by products that they make on site. It was for adults with disabilities who live there and host a school there so people could come and do conferences and events there and workshops there. And they maintain the place and they live in the place, and they also produce products, some natural products. They have a little farm there where they also do teaching and hosting of school children to learn about farm things. And it's a business, but it's a socially oriented business, partially funded by the products and services they provide, partially funded by the government and the people who live there.
Is this in a village? Is it in a city? Is it?
It's in a village.
It's in a village.
And it is a community in and of itself, right? All of these residents live there together. They have a mutual group. They're a group of people who are the stewards, maybe 5, people who are not people with disability who steward the place. But the place is made up of people who have a shared economy.
And
so anybody who
is this a special place, or can this be translated to other places?
I don't know what you mean by special.
Is it an unusual place where people cooperate with each other unusually, or could it?
No, I would say that in this region it's quite usual. There were a couple of them. There was one with some elders who were, retired but not quite retired and had a mutual farm. There are other places. This seems to be in that region quite common, that there are these social enterprises that are partially subsidized by the government in order to restore the physical geography, the geography and ecology, partially as social programs. So there seem to be quite a lot of social enterprises down there like this. And I spoke to the guy who is the director, and he was saying, we break even every year. And he said, I sit at the beginning of the year and say, what are we going to need? How many students are we going to have? What are we going to, what's the funding we've got? And we break even. We make sure to break even. And what that means is if we produce some extra produce, we know there's a few places around us that are in need. And we give that to them, or we give them a discounted rate because we break even. Our purpose at the end of the year is to always break even.
Okay, so what's your project doing in this village? How is it changing the currency? How is it changing? So
this village is the idea. So you can see a lot of these types of projects where a village is getting together. It could be an eco village, or in that area cooperatives. And so there are these different, I'm going to call them modules, like communities, right? Communities, we're calling them. And in between communities, there's also commerce. And right now that commerce uses euros. That's what we use. Or maybe they help each other out. Like I said, these guys are like, yeah, we just help those guys out. But there is no real, again, I was talking about the circulatory system at the beginning. There's no circulatory system that would have them understand which are the villages, let's say, that share our values, which are the communities that have what we want. In today's economy, if you're looking, let's say you're making soaps and you need to get the ingredients for your soaps and you want to source locally, but it's cheaper to source somewhere else than you do, because what does it matter, right? what I'm trying to create is that you would create an economic system from community to community, not from individual to individual, that would create those pathways along the way. And I'm calling this a values system or a reputation system. And so we say that, you know, money's a store of value, but what value? What are our values? I thought, well, what if you could measure values? What do we value? What do you value? And what do I value? And we might value different things. So if I could know in this group, restoring the ecology in this region is very important. Spain is in danger of desertification.
Yeah.
And so environment is really important to the people. And so I would like to know the reputation of a community that I'm working with in terms of their ecological preservation, especially if I'm sourcing my ingredients for my soap, right? So
Yeah.
that's a value, and you could represent that in a certain way. Another value that we saw is, of course, cultural values and social values. This is a village that is a social enterprise that is helping people with disabilities. That isn't over there. That's you know, and it might be, this one is intentionally no profits. That one's for profit. Those are values. You could argue about whether they're good values or not good values, but you want to know before I share with you. Let's just say I've got a lot of surplus pumpkins. I like to use pumpkins because we've all been in that situation.
Is this something that businesses or co-ops or eco-village or these groups around the village, it's something they sign up to? Is it a website? Is it a platform? Is it a face-to-face meeting once a week? What is it?
Not yet. I'm working on it. So I'll tell you where I am in this, but let me just tell you what the economy is like, right? Sure. Let's just say I've got a bunch of extra pumpkins. I want to give them away. I know that this factory over here, they'll make some pumpkin pies and sell them, and one guy will get all the profit. And this factory over near here, I know they're going to make some pumpkin pies and they're just going to share them among the people. So who am I going to give the pumpkins to? They're going to go bad anyway, right? And so it's about values. And now I gave them away. Now, if I gave the pumpkins to the village where the people made pumpkin soup and pumpkin pie and ate them, you could say no financial transaction happened. But did a value transaction happen? It did. Yeah. And so I want to be able to measure the value and the values of these groups. And what I'm doing at the stage that I'm at right now is phase 1. Is I've gathered research and I'm gathering the groups that will want to do this and experiment with this new system of values. And yes, right now it's all in an Airtable. It's in, you know, you put in your community, what you've got, and then you rate each other on the interactions. But it's just a game now. It's just a game. So we're going to do a simulation, a 2-day simulation game in May, where I'm going to bring people who are interested together. That's why I'm meeting with them, bringing them together. And for 2 days, we're just going to play a game.